Hello, Prof.
Hello.
It looks like
I can hear you.
Yeah, it looks like we are certainly live. Since we are moderating by ourselves, let me cross-check.
Indeed, that is true.
Let me make sure that... one moment. All right, we are live, Prof.
Okay.
How are you doing?
I'm fine. I'm fine. No problem.
Long time no see. Long time no see.
Indeed, long time no see. So far away from each other.
I know, Prof. I never imagined. I don't think we've ever done such an outing, and I don't know why. Why not?
Well, this is innovative. There's always a time for everything.
Well, as we discussed before, it's going to be conversational, interactional, and one of the things that has kept our people in bondage is the deception and the kind of dependency system that has been created by Cameroon. The deception made sure that we didn't know our history, that we believed in Cameroon as, you know, the historical reality that should not be altered. And what Cameroon then did with that deception was to institutionalize it in terms of economic, political, and social structures that made us totally dependent on them. And I think this outing is relevant and for us to be able to explain to our people why this deception is still in place and why there are enablers continuously being recruited, you know, to perpetuate this deception, which is critical for our enslavement. So you are one of our finest brains. You remember I told you you are the last historian standing. When Mola passed away, and when Dr. Yombang passed away, I felt really sad. We had some differences, but these were living encyclopedias that, you know, their presence alone was an historical fact which could not be altered. And their passing away leaves us wanting. As I said to you, who is going to bless Ambazonia once we take it over? Who is going to help? Yes, because the generation we see today are mostly politicians. So who are the godfathers? Who are the statesmen remaining to bless our nation and to emblematize what we stand for and what we have for, and to knowledge of where they are coming from and where they are headed to.
Actually, you see, what you've just described is the nature of all colonial occupiers and oppressors. The very idea which the colonial oppressor cannot stand is that the colonized can assert himself, the colonized people can assert their identity and set their own agenda. And so all colonial powers, all oppressors, whether they be white or black, have always set up and set out to make sure that the colonized people do not know their history, do not stand up for their rights, and do not challenge the oppressive status quo. And in that agenda, always they have enablers. Always. Read the history of any liberation movement on this continent or in Asia. It's exactly the same. And all of them use exactly the same language. It's amazing when you look at this whole thing. The colonial authority always claim that the oppressed is what? They tell you the oppressed are challenging law and order. The oppressed are terrorists, and deal with them as you want. Check out. Everybody talks about Mandela. I've known that the South African apartheid system characterized him as a terrorist. Everybody knows that. Mugabe was a terrorist. Everybody knows that. The Cuban leader was a terrorist. Mao Zedong was every liberation movement that challenges the colonial oppressor. They're always. And that's the commonality you find amongst all colonial oppressors. That language is exactly the same. That modus operandi is exactly the same. And that modus operandi is always to use force. In the false belief that they have monopoly of force. And when I heard one, I don't know what to describe him, some fellow over across the Mungo there. Half education is a very bad thing. It parrots. It says the state has the monopoly of force. I'm sure he just looked at some picked that thing somewhere and started parroting it. But actually what Max Weber did say, that the state has monopoly, legitimate use of force. That word legitimate is very, very critical. But of course, our individual, I suppose he doesn't know what legitimate means, and he doesn't understand the nuance in all of that. So what has always impressed me, even in our own struggle, is to discover that the colonial oppressor aligned himself exactly with all colonial oppressors. And that's why I've been saying that this continent has not completely gotten rid of colonialism. The UN is clear, and the instrument of the African Continental Organization is very clear, that colonialism in all its forms, shape, and manifestation must be eradicated from the continent. And that's the UN agenda as well, must be eradicated. So the fact that you find the white man packed his bags and went away doesn't mean that colonialism ended on this continent. It hasn't. We have a living example in the Ambazonian case. We have a living example in the Eritrean case. We have a living example in the Western Sahara case. Black on black colonization. Because some neighboring country thinks it has a bigger size, a bigger population, and a presumed military power can turn around and grab the territory next door. History has shown that it doesn't work. It can never happen. Just as South Africa failed to grab Namibia, just as Eritrea, Indonesia failed to grab East Timor, just as Imperial Ethiopia failed to grab Eritrea. These are living examples. Morocco has been strong for the past half century, thinking that it can succeed and grab the Western Sahara. It will never succeed. But more countries that are wise enough, when they see a situation like this, they say, okay, fine. And that's what Indonesia did. So look, what we are doing here is not achievable. And they left. And my advice to the colonial, our own colonial oppressor has always been, please, read history. Read history. And you'll find out that you will never succeed in your expansionism in the next 1,000 years. It will never happen. So here we are, facing, we'll be discussing one of the biggest historical frauds that has ever been recorded on this continent. What passes for as 20th May and the colonial oppressor keeps on trying to ram it down people's throat. That was something that was legally, legitimately, and even politically well done. No, on no count, even on political level. No talk of legally. It was a gigantic fraud, a big swindle. And in the course of this conversation, we shall pick up elements of that and other issues that are linked to all this fraud that is being committed by our colonial oppressor.
That's wonderful, Prof. When you talk about the necessity to eradicate, colonialism from within the continent, and the fact that the white people packed their bags and left, does not in any way symbolize the end of colonialism. When I was doing research on the issue of the 20th May, one of the most outstanding issues which I found was the interest of France. Do not forget, even though we are talking about 20 May as a component of the illegal presence of an alien system, it is important for us to dissect it as a standalone component. We know from 1961 that the moment the occupier marshaled its forces into our homeland, it basically entrenched itself as a colonial power, and anything it did, was based on colonialism. Now, but one of the most important things I found in researching this topic was a visit, I think in February 1971, by then President Pompidou. And Pompidou, for him, it was critical following the accord between Cameroon and France and other Francophone African countries, which was premised on commercial ties, military ties, monetary ties, and otherwise, that the Cameroon as a state remains Francophone. And that despite the fact that Cameroon had rolled its tanks into Ambazonia and effectively taken over our country, they were not satisfied that the notion of perception of Anglo-Saxonism was not totally eradicated, and that the imposed federalism of 1st October 1961 still gave a semblance of the existence of an Anglo-Saxon component which must be dealt with. And Pompidou's visit in 1971, as narrated by Samuel Eboa, who was a close aide to Mr. Ahijo, he said that to Foncha, that the aim of Pompidou's visit was to put an end of the notion of federalism that still gave the perception of the existence of an Anglo-Saxon entity. And as we've taken note, Pompidou, the moment he left, Ahijo engaged in a tour of our territory, visiting our fonds, including the Abombis, the Gallagher's, and the Fonum Saw, and trying to sell to them the notion of the burdensome nature of federalism to the notion of progress. And he had an enabler. The enabler who was perpetuating that psychophonic narrative with him was S.T. Muna. And he got compensated immediately after the referendum with the post of head boy of their parliament. And he stayed there for 15 years, perpetuating the notion of a one Cameroon. So it is very important for our people to know the desire of Cameroon. And that is also reflected in, if you listen to the language in any video of Cameroon's military presence in our homeland is French. Immediately after the referendum and the institutionalization of the supposed unitary state, they made sure that the Francophonization agenda, went unperturbed, and that Cameroon became known as a French country in order to safeguard the Franco-Cameroon alliance. And that is very critical for we will look into the illegality of, you know, their presence, their encroachment in 1961, but it's critical that you inject some input on the notion of the 20th of May.
Thank you. Let me take a step backwards. You raised some very, very salient historical point there about the military occupation of the southern Cameroons. I'll give a little bit of history. Of course, people tend to look at it and say, well, it is French Cameroon troops. But when we forget that, what people tend to forget is that these were troops led by French officers. They were led by French officers. It was only late into the 70s that French Cameroon was able to have their own officers leading their military, but they've all been controlled by France. And the question that people have always asked, and they've asked me, how come the southern Cameroons allowed French Cameroon to be to military take over? Many people don't know that the southern Cameroon never had an army. The British never had an army, never raised an army, even though the UN documents, trusteeship agreements permitted the British to be able to raise an army in the southern Cameroons. The British attitude, which is what has followed us throughout, very convenient for the British. After administering us together with Nigeria, what the British simply did was, they told the UN, well, if there's going to be any trouble in the southern Cameroons, we'll bring in troops from Nigeria. And that's what they were doing. They brought in troops whenever there was trouble. You remember the Balewudukum War? They brought in Nigerian troops there to quell the whole thing. Whenever there was a problem, you know, the whole drove of Nigerian policemen who came into the southern Cameroons and stayed. And this issue was very, very critical for the southern Cameroon political leadership. And when they had the tripartite meeting in May 1961, there was a contentious issue there. And the southern Cameroon political leadership didn't make it clear to the British that they are bent on ensuring that the southern Cameroons raise its own army and maintain its own army. What they simply asked the British was for assistance to achieve this. You know the British characteristic answer. The British said, we have no money to spend on you guys. Now, the southern Cameroons joined the rest. They said, okay, fine. They were prepared to go to Germany and seek help from Germany to raise an army. The British blocked that endeavor and insisted that security in the southern Cameroon was going to be maintained by troops from French Cameroon and the police from French Cameroon. This was so distressing, so distressing. And the southern Cameroon delegation at that tripartite meeting in May in Boya, it was held in Boya, said, how can we allow foreign troops to come into our territory? It's like an occupation. We'll be occupied. The British said they didn't see it that way. And they wrangled on that topic for a long time until Ahijo said, well, okay, what they were going to do, and this is part of Ahijo's deception. Ahijo was raised a very deceptive man. He lived a very deceptive political life, and he died in deception. He said, well, we're going to bring the southern Cameroon officers and soldiers who are serving the Nigerian army. And he tried to sugarcoat it by saying they should come back to the fatherland and serve the fatherland. And people said, but this is brought up in the English tradition. I said, they're going to come, okay, are they going to come to constitute an army in the southern Cameroon? He said, no. They were going to come and they were going to join their brothers in Yaoundé. And the two will constitute what he called a federal bilingual army. Can you ever hear of a thing like that? A federal bilingual army. But our own leadership was not smart enough. I think they should have stuck to their gun and said, no, we will not let this happen. And they allowed that, Ahidjo to deceive them. That the Tatos, the Anagos, and the Quentis, and all of this were going to come. And they will form, with French Cameroon, a federal, bilingual army. That word bilingual has always been used to deceive the world. But actually, like you correctly pointed out, one, everybody knows that French Cameroon army is a French army. They speak the language there is French, and it's French trained. The weapons they use are from France. It's recently that they've started diversifying the source of the weapons. So the issue about security was very, very important. Was raised. And the deception was practiced on our people and claimed that they were going to federal bilingual army. And each Southern Cameroon who joined the military there, we know, were bound to speak French. And it's French. Just like their police is all French. Everything is French. You know? And that's why, as far as the world is concerned, even up to today, I've traveled around the world. When I meet people and I speak English, of course, they look at my passport. Unfortunately, recently in Cameroon, and I speak English, and everybody says, how come you speak English? Then they say, no, as far as we're concerned, that's a French-speaking country. And then you start now a whole long history, trying to explain and so on and so forth. And French Cameroon itself has done nothing to remove that misconception or what. In fact, I've done everything to impress onto the world that French speaking. Go to every embassy, you find the language is French. What's the issue? Art is in French. When you have some Southern Cameroon serving there in some capacity, they are forced to express themselves and write in French. You don't do that, you don't get along. So that is part of the colonial agenda of France. That is a part of the colonial agenda of French Cameroon. And you correctly mentioned, indeed in 1971, Pompidou landed in Yaoundé. Pompidou was in Yaoundé to impress it on Ahidjo that, look, remember, this France-Afrique thing didn't just start today. Elf had discovered oil in the southern Cameroons and had been insisting that the southern Cameroon must be taken over. Because if they don't take it over, then French Cameroon will not be able to control the resources. And to convince Ahidjo, they told Ahidjo, look at what is happening in Nigeria. Do you know why there's Biafra? There's Biafra because of the oil issue equation. So if you don't take these people, that's what is going to happen to you as well. And Pompidou came after the elf had told him all of this, and he came to impress on his people that, look, we've been waiting for you to do this thing all this time, haven't. Time has come. Please, go ahead. And I say this with knowledge because, interestingly, recently in 1971, Ahidjo was defending federalism. Very, very interesting. And he was insulting many of the French Cameroon so-called intellectuals and politicians who were insisting what they called there should be unity, and that federalism and a federal state was not a mark of unity. That Ahidjo must do something about it, abolish it. And Ahidjo turned and asked them. He said, this is rubbish people are talking. Look at federal states in the world. Are you saying there's no unity in Germany? Are you saying there's no unity in the United States of America? So what are you guys saying that federalism does not reflect unity? And so on. As recently as 1961, Ahidjo was saying that, defending federalism. And how did that come about? There was a Southern Cameroon journalist. Because by 1965, there were rumors going around that the Southern Cameroon, or West Cameroon, they call it those days, was bent on seceding, leading the whole arrangement, because already we were fed up. We have intelligence report that Ahidjo's field operatives in Boya were filing to Ahidjo, and they were telling him, sir, there's unrest here, that people are comparing the Southern Cameroon to Gabon, and saying, if Gabon can be a sovereign state, why can Southern Cameroon be a sovereign state? Complaining that the Southern Cameroon has become a colony of French. I'm talking about 1965. And right at that time even, and this is an intelligence report, they are there, that what they call a rapport trimestriel, which will be filed from Boya to Yaoundé, and saying that there's a plot in the Southern Cameroons to secede and to call that country Ambazonia. I'm saying this because many people think that this Ambazonia business is just yesterday that came out. No. It has been there, right in Boya. So Ahidjo, in spite of all of this, was defending, and all of a sudden Pompidou landed to press the button. And then overnight, Ahidjo became a different story, speaking a different language. And for the record, they tried to turn it around and give the impression that it is. And this is what some enablers who pass for historian have been saying, that it is the people of West Cameroon or the Southern Cameroon who told Ahidjo to abolish the federation and institute a despotic unitary system. And the name that was mentioned, and it said Nzo Aki is the one who suggested the idea, or who told Ahidjo. And I'm saying, since when did any politician in the Southern Cameroon start instructing Ahidjo to do something, and Ahidjo will do that thing? So it's very, very strange. But Ahidjo, after Pompidou left, started speaking a different language, but pretending that he is not interested in all of that. Because when, according to these accounts, Nzo Aki told him, Ahidjo is reported to have said, well, you do that after me. But Ahidjo, that's precisely what Ahidjo was doing. And just to finish it a little bit, after Pompidou left, a conspiracy was hatched, a plot. There were 5 conspirators in that plot who plotted how to go about this, the assassination of the Federation. Ahidjo, one of the conspirators, Senghor, one of the conspirators, Charles Wana Anana was another conspirator, and of course, inevitably, this Paul Biya we are talking today, one of the conspirators as well. And finally, the 5th one was Musa Yaya Sarki Fada. These 5 people were involved in that conspiracy to murder the Federation. It was a real conspiracy, and Ahidjo was at the hub. And you see from it, there were 2 Nordists, 2 Bulu Beti people. Paul Senghor was brought in because he was a speechwriter, writing speeches and so on and so forth, and was Deputy Secretary General then. But otherwise, there was a Beti Nordist arrangement thing, and they had to get rid of the Southern Cameroons and formally annex, because they have been in control since 61 October, but now they have to formalize it by annexing it formally. And these conspirators then went about this whole business. And later, of course, you had Osman May, who was the federal inspector in Garo, in charge of the whole North. And then they drafted a constitution, got in Maurice Duverger, a Frenchman, his constitutional, and asked him to really look at and correct, do everything and so on. And that's a document Ahidjo pulled out and said that was his May 20th constitution, which he had prepared and pulled out. But we'll talk more about some of these details.
Thanks a lot, Prof. You've raised a lot of interesting issues, and I would just like to add on the issue of Pompidou and Ahidjo, because you talked about Ahidjo had been the champion of federalism as having of stability, or what they call his own exceptional notion of Cameroon. We must also recall that before Pompidou arrived in February, Jacques Foccart had been pushing for the execution of the UPC nationalists, what we should term Cameroon nationalism, to give Ahidjo the possibility of hijacking the notion of reunification, because the notion of reunification was actually being championed by the UPC and its leadership. Why the Ayijo axis was being seen as a puppet of the French system. You, as a strong constitutional lawyer, you recall that yes. Cameroon's constitution is something of, I think, the fourth of the Fifth French Republic. It's a replication of the constitution of the fourth French Republic. It was designed yes. and instituted to perpetuate Frenchness within Cameroon. And in January, why they commuted the death sentence of some UPCs. The champions of the UPCs, like Mr. Wangi, was executed a few weeks before Mr. Pompidou came in. And what then happened was, Ayijo then hijacked the notion of the reunification of Cameroon and pushing forward with his agenda to undermine the very premise of his own 1961 constitution, the premise of Article 47, which he used, I think, then Article 1 to override the premise of Article 47. Now, another issue I need Ambazonians to look into is, you talked about two issues, the notion of an army and that of leadership. What puzzles me, and I'll be raising a question with you, because you have been at the forefront of the erection of every anti-colonial structure. One moment, Prof. Let me decline the call. You have been at the forefront of the erection of every anti-colonial structure since the fall of the Berlin Wall, in instituting the SDF, in being the one that convened the All Anglophone conferences, and being the lead person in drafting the constitutional proposal that was, refused because of the so-called large. But I'll come to that, because the issue of leadership is critical. We are talking here about Ayijo. We are talking about Ayijo, a guy from the north with less wit than people like the Joas, the Fonlons, and all other Ambazonian leadership. Yep. To have been able to manipulate, Ambazonia by refusing to implement the premise of 1608, putting in place a constitution, transforming their constitution from La Constitution to La Constitution Fédérale, imposing it on Ambazonia, dismantling every socio-economic and political institution that empowered us. And this is the worst part of it. A multi-party democracy, the first democracy within the continent, that had ensured transition of power from one prime minister to the other, was manipulated to dismantling all political parties in 1965. And so leadership, in 1966, right, leadership has been a big problem for Ambazonia. Either they have been naive, or they have been recruited as historical revisionists, enablers to perpetuate, the dogma of the Cameroon system. Because I cannot understand how a leadership that walk out of the Eastern House of Assembly and set up office in their own capital without firing a shot could allow itself not to think about instituting a kind of a defense mechanism to protect our institutions, our people, and our independence. And how can this particular leadership, how could they have been unable, to understand the machination of the French? And I'm very grateful for this generation, and I'm grateful for the fact that we have been, as you talked about the leaders wanting to go to Germany to seek help. Was the same one that was, trying as much as possible to undermine self-determination within Ambazonia. But what is important for me is the departure from that naive leadership in the past. I know some of them put up a fight. But as we can see within the context of our struggle in the past 30 years that we have been involved in, what has failed us woefully has been that of leadership. An intellectual like yourself, you are a man of brimstone. You are somebody from the onset has believed in the right of Ambazonians to defend themselves. And how it became possible that after setting up the SDF, you people transferred it over to Mr. John Frundi. It's puzzling. And that, Prof, it's not a laughable matter. Just come to think about it.
People have made that point. Yes, it's true. You're right.
You remember I called you a couple of years ago when I did an interview with you, and I said, you've been described as a reluctant general.
Yes.
How is it possible that you, Content Elart, they now passing around for historical enabler and who ran away? How could you set up, the foundation of Ambazonian consciousness, and you handed it over to Barrister Content Elart?
I laugh because actually you raise so many issues, very salient, very salient, and I think you are spot on when you say that AJ himself didn't have much of original ideas. Actually, even just like the present octogenarian has no ideas of his own. But Ahijo, you are right. Ahijo, the two things that Ahijo later on claimed that they were his were never his. The idea of what they keep on calling a reunification was forced down his throat by UPC. You correctly made that remark. That's very true. And he reluctantly took on that. The other idea too, and many people don't say this a lot, the Southern Cameroon forced federalism down his throat. He was a very reluctant recipient of federalism. But the French advised him to accept it as a bait, if you get what I mean.
Yeah.
As a bait, as a way of capturing the Southern Cameroons. Because how could you explain, here is French Cameroon, they talk so much about their sovereignty and so on. And they had sovereignty, assuming the French gave them that sovereignty. They had sovereignty. And barely a year and a half later, they were prepared to forego that sovereignty and assume the lesser status of a mere federated state at the same level with this thing. So that was a bait, a strategy to, like, as we say in Pidgin, you take corn, you throw a fowl, you can chop, And so he knew very well, and the French advised him, if you do not accept the federalism we French are talking about, they will go to Nigeria, you lose, they will have nothing. So he reluctantly accepted. So he accepted federalism, rammed down his throat. He accepted reunification, rammed down his throat. And as for federalism, which was rammed down his throat, he then decided, after the French have talked to him, said, look, yes, you're a good boy, you've done what you're supposed to do. Now undo that federalism and go back to what we know. And still they're going back, And I've always told people, look, there is no single instance in world history where if federalism has failed, it has been supplanted by a unitary system. There's none. There's no one example, but that one did not even survive for long. And that was the case of Adolf Hitler, when in 1934, he changed German federalism, become a unity state under him. But we know what happened. Immediately after the war, the Germans lost no time and they reinstated the federal system. Now, check out history. There is no other instance where a unity system has successfully supplanted a federal system. And wherever federalism has failed, what always happens is the whole system has collapsed. The component unit asset their individuality Check out history. Not only here. Check out Latin America. Check out in Asia, Africa, Europe. It has been the same thing. So this idea that French Cameroon could fraud a unitary system and impose on a federal system after it says it was not working is just not on. And I want to say, we are saying this not just for a record, of course, for historical record, because we, like the Jews in Israel, we have since left, like the Jews in Egypt, we have since left Egypt. We had crossed the Red Sea. Moses has stopped the sea, we cross over. I will never go back. That is clear. But we are saying this thing now for purposes for the record, so that history can record. And secondly, to show that they shouldn't think that we are stupid and that we don't know. We know or we knew what happened. The fundamental question you ask about leadership, how come our people allow themselves to be manipulated by these people? I've tried to figure out why. Two things. One, our people spend so much time and energy fighting the British to get out of Nigeria. A lot of effort and energy was expended on that. The meetings in Nigeria, meetings in the UK, and so on, trying to extricate us from Nigeria. And even after we left in 1954, as far as the arrangement was concerned, we were still part of Nigeria. Until 1960, when Nigeria achieved independence. So our people spend, that is a lot of time, a lot of energy. And because of that, Nigeria became the reference. All our people. That's where they cut the political teeth. That's where they had their education. That is where some of them got married. That's where they interacted. Nigeria for them was the example. Even for the intellectual mention, even Fallon. He brought up in Nigeria. All the Norman Goose are talking about, all these are big intellectuals. All of them. Young one, all of Nigeria. So our people were never exposed. They were never exposed to the world. And like the American Consul General remarked, that our people, the leadership mainly livers, which in itself is nothing, because Hejo was just a primary school graduate. And the biggest job ever had was a postmaster. So that was a Hejo district. So I don't think that in itself. But the point is that they were not exposed to the rest of the world. Their highest district was Nigeria. That's what all referring to Nigeria. And when, of course, they went for constitutional meetings in London and UK, they only go for a day or two. And know those meetings. You get in the plane, you come, they take you into a hotel, 10 minutes after I take you back. There was no interaction with other UK MPs or political leaders or intellectuals. Nothing. Not one of our politicians in Boya could take a phone call and call somebody in the UK, a minister there, or an intellectual there. Nothing. Not one. So there was that very serious limitation of our people. Now, when they turned over, not turned out to French Cameroon, there was a different experiment at all. And that's another thing that killed us. Naivety, born out of being too trusting. They believed when French Cameroon come and tell lies as the oligarchs are telling, fraud, they took them at face value. They didn't question. They didn't look behind to say, no, what do people mean? They took them. But later on, then at their own expense, that they have been taken for the ride. These two things, in my view, contributed very, very seriously to the leadership which we had. They would have still put up a very good fight if the British didn't lay them down this path with Nigeria thing and so on. They would still have done if we didn't have this culture of believing. And part of it, of course, is due to religion. There are two religious branches of our politicians were either Catholic or the Protestant. And the leadership at first, Foncha was Catholic. Joe was Catholic. The only person who was not Catholic was Muna. And that is why, and that's part of the reason why he was able to get on with Ahijo. Because, going back to the history of UPC, Ahijo and the Catholics were always at loggerheads. Because UPC, these were actually at the Roman Catholics who are at the forefront. Bebe, Yedi, and all of those guys, you know, Mahima Tipa. They were not Protestants. They were essentially Catholics. And the Archdiocese then in Yaoundé, the Archbishop, was giving Ahijo headache. So Ahijo had no love lost for Catholics. None at all. Killing the Muslim didn't mean anything, or any Roman Catholic. And so he was more aligned to people like the Protestantism, Mona, for example. And that, when you look at all of this, explaining the way our people found themselves in, and of course, the last element is our people, at some point, they cracked and stopped thinking together and acting together. They will start each man for himself, God for us, and the devil takes the hindmost. That's what happened. Mona fighting his survival, Foncha fighting his own survival, Endele for his own, and so on and so forth. Mutual accusation and blame. Either it's Graphic people are taking this, or the coastal people are taking this, and so on and so forth. And there was no time when our people said, look, we have a common adversary, let me call the enemy, in French Cameroon. We've been brought up in a tradition of multi-party politics. Why would we accept a one-party system? But our people willingly accepted one-party system because Ahijo was able to dangle a carrot. If you come along, this is what is going to happen. And kept on this phony notion of what he called national unity. And remember, whenever French Cameroon talks about unity, they are thinking of grabbing and absorbing the southern Cameroons. Unity doesn't mean that there's secure unity within French Cameroon. After all, French Cameroon was in fractions. They were killing each other. They were divided. They've never talked about unity among themselves there. But whenever I hear the word unity, what they mean was they're talking about capturing West Cameroon or the Southern Cameroon. So that's their concept of unity. That's their concept. And even up to today, that's what they mean when they talk about it. It's like using the word bilingualism. What is bilingualism? They tell you, oh, what they're doing is they're trying to do what they call Anglophones a favor by writing something in some funny English, and they call that bilingualism. And they say Cameroon is a bilingual nation. Go to Senegal, you see the practice of bilingualism. You get on the street, or 4 people meet, 3 will be speaking to you English and French. In Senegal, which is 100% a French-speaking country. So what rubbish are they talking about bilingualism in Cameroon? Go and see, and I've met many of these guys internationally, Senegalese. They will talk to you in French and they talk to you in English. They see our own so-called bilingual Cameroon people. Go and meet them. They will tell parlez-moi en français. Mais vous savez, mais nous, and they start going on and on and on and on. These are concepts that were used to bamboozle our people. And then finally, this thing about the SDF. How come? This is one of the sad memories. I mean, and as perhaps one of the few living people, I think, if just me and Frundi, unfortunately the rest have since transitioned. When you had people like late Asanga, Siga Asanga, I was a professor there in the Faculty of Letters in Yaoundé. Myself, Lengwa Siri, and so on. You say we're educated people. It's a Justice Nyowakai. How come? Frundi took over. Well, what happened at that time? And that is the excuse which we gave and cannot to give. That the only free agent at that time was who? Was Frundi. All of us were still in the employ of the government of Yaoundé. And for some people like Mr. Justin Yowakai, a judge, a Supreme Court judge, could not be seen do anything. And anybody who knows the way the French Cameroon system operates, would know. So we agreed that, well, we would not be at the forefront. He would take the leadership. But that leadership was going to be constrained by us, especially Sika Asanga, who became the secretary, and those of us who were going to provide legal guidance from behind and so on. But this is, if you read history, people hardly reckon with this. That sometimes you look at an individual, you think, okay, this person is somebody you can put here and you will listen to advice, he will listen to this and so on. But the person gets in there and becomes his own person and grows wings. And you talk at that time, you turn around and tell him, I'm sacking you and all that and so on, because you give him power. There are many instances in the world like that. Hitler came to power through that means as well, before people realized he had become a monster, you know. And so that is what happened. That's what happened with us. And by the time we thought we could do a change and so on, he had entrenched himself and got the Bamileke alliance with him and so on. And that became very, very difficult. And I do remember very well those early days. We fought, even to impress on them that we needed a federal structure to federalism. I remember at the first two Congress of the LGF, these issues were argued and argued and argued. And these Francophone guys would look at us straight in the face and tell us, we don't want to hear that nonsense about federation. There is secession. These are people who have been parachuted into the party. And they were telling us that, they look at us straight in the face and abusing us and telling us, we want to hear that nonsense about federalism. This past is gone. We don't want to hear about it. And for me, when I absorbed things like that, I internalized them and I then said, oh, so it means these people really, they're incurable and there's nothing you can do about it. They're irredeemable. And from that moment, I said, we must fight a federal cause, move on onto AAC, that one must be. And when we crossed the Rubicon by saying, when we went to Bamenda, if they refuse within a reasonable time to accept, we have no choice but to revive our statehood and state it. And I've stuck to that. I'm logical with myself, you know. And reasonable time, after so many years, you can't say that reasonable time will not come. And so we did what we think was correct, and that was correct historically and even legally.
Thanks a lot, Prof. I am really excited because I talk about this generation, including all of us, what we are doing at this particular moment. If you look back at historical periods, whether it was 1961, whether it was the plebiscite, non-implementation of 1608, Fumban, and then the takeover of our territory in 1972, all of these periods, right up to the period of even the AAC, Cameroon has been very excellent in using due processes to legalize on the entrenchment of its occupation. It has always used a process to have some form of legitimacy and legality to justify the outcome or its presence within Ambazonia. And so too was the fake referendum of 1972 that dismantled the very La Constitution Federale which they imposed in 1961. And I think every time that Cameroon has wanted to institutionalize an illegality, it has used the due process. And when I said I'm excited is because in the past 5 years, we have denied Cameroon every opportunity to use any local process to legalize its illegality or at least to celebrate those it had institutionalized before the past 5 years. That 11th of February, 20th of May. We have stopped it. You cannot celebrate days that emerge out of a conception of manipulation. And you will not institutionalize new days or dates for the continuous celebration of your manipulation. We've rejected any of its so-called domestic approaches to resolving the conflict between Cameroon and Ambazonia. We have rejected any of its so-called committee, commission, or whatever it has attempted in the past 4.5 years. And this is thanks to one of the greatest innovations which we have introduced. And as you have said, after the reasonable period that was declared over, I think, from the London Community in 1995, we moved from the situation of fighting to amend the colonial state and to integrate ourselves in to owning our own independence. The innovation which has come to stay, which we started in 1995 with putting in place the Southern Cameroon's Youth League, is to have been able to understand how has it been possible that a fully independent state with its own government, its own economic institutions, its own system, would simply be overthrown by another country which you have rightly described as lacking in stability and unity. How has it been possible? And it has been due to the absence of a defense force within Amazonia to defend our own institutions, our own independence. And it's critical as we talk about the 20th of May for Ambazonians to understand these critical ingredients that have made us susceptible to Cameroon's manipulation and colonialism. That of what you've written in the book, Too Much Trusting, that we trusted both leadership within Ambazonia and we trusted Cameroon. That blind trust has been our undoing. And
indeed.
Yes, and in terms of Ambazonian leadership, I believe strongly that without a vibrant, questioning and interrogative civil society that questions the actions of leaders, the population can easily be manipulated into a quagmire. And I think we have been able to change that perception within the Ambazonian struggle. And as you rightly said also, it's tempting. But how do you explain that when Cameroon always talked about unity, it never meant unity within Cameroon? That was totally...
Never.
You had the Bull axis, you had the Northeast, you had the Bami Basars. You know, that
yes.
They were just stitched together, through a kind of a political system that sustained that the three components by the use of force. Unity for Cameroon has always been, a camouflage for the annexation of Ambazonia.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think this is a lesson we must take seriously. But one last thing before you take over is this. By denying Cameroon the opportunity, I remember a couple of days when the chairman of the War Council, Ben, put out a statement and declaring 20th of May a day of resistance. We were discussing in the background what should happen if Cameroon renege on its usual celebratory mood. We knew, we anticipated that the humiliation that we have given Cameroon in the past 4.5 years, being unable to hold any election in Ambazonia, being unable to celebrate any of its illegal date, has fundamentally damaged Cameroon's claim of the power of governance over Ambazonia. This is very damaging, even more than the armed resistance itself. You know, and I think Ambazonians must take this seriously, that denial to Cameroon of the opportunity in our own land to celebrate a contraption, you know, and to legitimize a fraud that has cost us our lives and opportunities for millions of our people, is something that is very critical for the defense of our own independence. And in the coming days, we're looking forward to our people engaging in resistance and making it known to Cameroon that it's over. Neither the historical dates which you instituted illegally, nor any perception of the institution of another illegality through some domestic processes of attempts to resolve the conflict will ever again be tolerated by the Ambazonian people.
Yeah, I think you're very right. The point that needs to be emphasized, highlighted, and sidelighted here is something has happened which has taken French Cameroon completely unawares. They have believed so much in fraud, in lies, in corruption, and in bribery that, as far as they were concerned, they had bribed and corrupted the so-called Anglophones. And they were now content and sitting pretty. And that's why they were able to do the things they did in 2014, 15, and 16, you know. But all of a sudden, this whole thing has blown up into their face. And this is something they're asking themselves. Because they had imagined that these liberation fighters, these are children who never knew the Southern Cameroons. They never knew Southern Cameroons. And as far as French Cameroon was concerned, it was a done deal. After the older generation had been taken care of, either through imprisonment, killing, or bribery and corruption, then it's a done deal. Nobody's ever going to challenge them anymore. But the fact that the youths, Ambazonian children, have risen up has come to them like a shock. This is something they have never bargained with at all. How and where do these young people have these ideas? They're standing up to them, and they're saying the kind of thing they're saying. This is our homeland. You will not take an inch of it. You'll be living in fraud. You have been stealing from us, spoliation of our natural resources. It shall never happen again. You must just pack and go. Now, if this was something being done by the older generation, they would say, well, these are people who have been tainted by the Southern Cameroons or whatever thing, that period and so on. But these are people, these are young men. And many of them, very well educated, university graduates. And some of them have even gone to that Ayaba place they have seen. So they can compare, they know. And I've always told people that one of the biggest mistakes French Cameroon made, and is still making, was never to have made
engaging in resistance and making it known to Cameroon that it's over. Neither the historical dates which you instituted illegally, nor any perception of the institution of another illegality through some domestic processes of attempts to resolve the conflict will ever again be tolerated by the Ambazonian people.
Yeah, I think you're very right. The point that needs to be emphasized, highlighted, and sidelighted here is something has happened which has taken French Cameroon completely unawares. They have believed so much in fraud, in lies, in corruption, and in bribery that as far as they were concerned, they had bribed and corrupted the so-called Anglophones. And they were now content and sitting pretty. And that's why they were able to do the things they did in 2014, 15, and 16, you know. But all of a sudden, this whole thing has blown up into their face. And this is something they're asking themselves. Because they had imagined that these liberation fighters, these are children who never knew the Southern Cameroons. They never knew Southern Cameroons. And as far as French Cameroon was concerned, it was a done deal. After the older generation had been taken care of, either through imprisonment, killing, or bribery and corruption, then it's a done deal. Nobody's ever going to challenge them anymore. But the fact that the youths, Ambazonian children, have risen up has come to them like a shock. This is something they have never bargained with at all. How and where do these young people have these ideas? They're standing up to them. And they're saying the kind of thing they're saying. This is our homeland. You will not take an inch of it. You'll be living in fraud. You have been stealing from us. Spoliation of our natural resources. It shall never happen again. You must just pack and go. Now, if this was something being done by the older generation, they would say, well, these are people who have been tainted by the Southern Cameroons or whatever thing, that period and so on. But these are people, these are young men. And many of them, very well educated, university graduates. And some of them have even gone to that Ayaba place they have seen. So they can compare, they know. And I've always told people that one of the biggest mistakes French Cameroon made, and is still making, was never to have made French Cameroon attractive to the people of the Southern Cameroon. Up to today, if you ask anybody, they've not made anything attractive. Why would anybody exchange to go to French Cameroon? There's nothing there that attracts anybody. And they have not done and will never ever do anything that will attract any person, even apart from us. They can never attract Equatorial Guinea, for example. Can never attract Gabon, for example. Central African Republic or Chad. No. If they had been a thinking people, what they would have done right from the beginning is to make the place attractive. Oh, you have your autonomy, no problem. Road networks, all of these things, scholarship here, this, everything, and so on and so forth. People would have compared and said, well, we're having a good deal here. But we never had a good deal. And so when everybody looks back at this, just yesterday, somebody was circulating a picture of just the stretch of road, Medamquet there. The buses, everybody got stuck, cannot go anywhere. This is 2021. This is incredible. 2021. And they say, it's a French. Why would anybody want Yaoundé, for God's sake? So it has been, and our youths understand this very, very well. They didn't need to, this is not rocket science for them to understand that their destiny, their interest doesn't lie with French Cameroon. In fact, the question people keep on asking, oh God, What type of a curse did you put on us? How on earth did you come together with these people? People have been asking me that question. And I said, as the Almighty God, frankly, I do not know. And this question, everything French people do confirms this. And people keep on asking. There's absolutely nothing at all, nothing that attracts or can possibly make anybody to be with French Cameroon. No, nothing. You just mentioned. Let me just. You just mentioned this thing about they following due processes. No, they never follow any due process. All fraud. Even the 20th May thing is all fraud throughout, all the way from electoral election, the statistics, the figure they gave out, even legally. Some people who don't understand law, don't know anything about law. Some enablers, some fraud. They will tell you that it was legal. When you ask them, how was it legal, they start telling you, oh, Ahejo told Funcha this, Funcha told Ahejo this, or told Mona. That is how it become legal. Oh, so Mona, they went to campaign and all that and so on and so forth. That is it. Oh, Ahejo called Mona or told Funcha and told him that he was going to organize election and referendum and so on, all of this. So for that person, as far as he was concerned, that was all okay. I mean, I have never seen that kind of shallow thinking and shallow reasoning, you know. But these are people who pass for some experts in some fields and so on. Yeah, but we'll get more into some of these issues. Yeah, and I'll tell you. But just to tell you that one thing, and people seem to organize, neither in the four legislatures of the Federation, four legislatures, remember the two houses, the House of Assembly and the House of Chiefs in Boya, the House of Assembly in French Cameroon, and the federal government. So in neither of these four legislatures, nor even the federal government, or even the government of the two constitutive states, was there ever any resolution that was adopted anywhere expressing a desire that we want to get rid of federalism. Not even in the CNU party unique political bureau. There was never any such discussion. Nowhere expressing a view that we have then looked at this and discussed it and come to a conclusion that federalism must go. So there was no public, governmental, ministerial, parliamentary, or party debate on the issue of abolishing the federation. Nowhere. So how can anybody come and tell you and convince anybody that this was properly done? When Ahejo himself, when he went to the assembly, he said, "J'ai décidé de mettre fin à la fédération." He didn't say that through advisement. He said he has decided. The referendum that came was the usual despotic mechanism that I used to validate, in between quotes, a decision which had already been taken. So people who come and say, oh, the abolition was as a consequence of the referendum, it's a big lie. Ahejo had done that. And on that day, 8th of May, when Ahejo made that speech in Yaoundé, the House of Assembly in Boya didn't even have the guts to even meet to say, okay, let's dispose of pending business and formally dissolve the House of Assembly in Boya. Even the so-called Federal Assembly Yaoundé, nobody had the courage even to say, let's meet and formally dissolve this assembly, National Assembly, and so on. As soon as Ahejo made that speech, everybody just escaped to their villages. That was it. That was it. And next thing was, Ahejo came out, said there's a referendum. Even election organized within 2 weeks, which normal election organized within 2 weeks, and then you proclaim election. And I remember distinctly, the first result that came from Far Acquire 100%. And when the computer result, they told us that Ahejo won by 99.99%. It's so ridiculous, and it's so shameful that if you look at the figures that they gave, and they tell you that 70% of the population of West Cameroon voted yes. 70%. That would mean that nearly every adult in the southern Cameroons, and possibly a number of children, the old and the infirm, and mad, all of them voted. I mean, This is the figure they themselves give. I'm not inventing anything. It's 70%. But then they said, for East Cameroon, they said, oh, only 50%. So it shows that West Cameroon was much more eager to give themselves to be annexed than East Cameroon was prepared to absorb them. That's all big one fraud. But later on, I'll show you the population figures which French Cameroon has been playing round and round and round each year. They change. Within 2 years, they say there are 10 billion. Next year, they say there are 5. Next year, they say there are 15. Always like that. There's never been any regular census in French Cameroon, even the days of the French. Never. These are just exaggerated estimates they make and they put out. And when they put out, they hand over to you and they take and they say the population. Tell me whenever they've ever had a census. Bia's tiny, small, what they call that place, the south there. You know, in Ahijo's time, there were 200 or 300,000 people. When Bia came, they became 2 million. Now I think there are 5 million already. Because census is used for political and economic reasons.
Yeah. Prof, I think you've said a couple of interesting things which should be of interest to our people. And it's the rhetorical question you ask. How the hell did we find ourselves with these people? How the hell did you find ourselves with these people? It's a question I have been asking myself. And I've said this repeatedly. You see, if you are occupied by maybe even South Africa, or if you are occupied, yes,
so country of substance, you say, okay, perhaps.
and most importantly, Prof, is what you've also said, and I've said this in different ways. For close to 60 years, they manipulated us to the level where Ambazonians deny their identity.
Yep.
Ambazonians could walk, a Cameroonian could walk into a room full of Ambazonians and automatically cause all the Ambazonians to begin to speak in French.
Yeah.
An Ambazonian could change his or her name to a French name to be accepted. That is the level to which Cameroon indoctrinated and manipulated our people and developed the arrogant confidence that it was a done deal. And as you have said, and rightfully too, they are shocked. They are shocked. And that's why they are making one mistake to the other. Listen, this is, you talk about attraction. Building a model that is attractive even to your enemy. Remember, and I've said repeatedly, I have been so opposed to the French that French was the only subject I never ever took. Never ever spoke French. The first time I really spoke French was when I was in Germany, because I was locked up within the asylum regime with Togolese, Congolese, and others. Yes, that's the first time, because of the arrogance with which the French thought we were obligated to speak their language without any reciprocation on like incentives. Now, but this is important. I come from the school that believes that the only way you can have your ideals and ideas, to be accepted or to overcome opposition is to make yours to be a better model than existing models. Mm-hmm. How is it possible that a country like Cameroon, so backward politically, economically, culturally, educationally, should oblige Ambazonians to accept it as a superior entity within the context of a single nation? Mm-hmm. But there are facts in history which should remind us that each time we have been given the alternative, Ambazonians have run away from Cameroon. I became one of the first students who gained direct entry into the University of Buea. The moment the possibility existed for Ambazonians to leave Yaoundé into Buea, they moved in their thousands. There were Ambazonians who abandoned their education within that quagmire political system just to come back into theirs. And I think one of the reasons why Cameroon has failed as a state is not only because you cannot dismantle federalism to be taken over by a unitary state. And as you've said rightfully, there is no historical precedent where you think you dismantle a federal, two persons mutual coexistence, and you replace it with a centralized political oppressive system that denied them the very opportunities that they had under the federalism. And that every federalism that has collapsed or dismantled has ended up either in a chaotic breakdown of the state. You had former Yugoslavia, you had other, the USSR, and all those stitched together and named anyhow. The one that you can see as a model that, can even be something that evolves towards more decentralization is like, the United Kingdom. And despite the devolution of powers, there are still people who believe that identity, nationalism, control, and determination of your economic and political future is more. Now, there is something to highlight, and which is central to what you have put forward. Cameroon is so stupid. I have never seen a stupid country in my entire life. And if there is one thing that is motivating Ambazonians to fight, is that you cannot allow yourself to be enslaved by people who are far lesser than you in every aspect of your existence. You cannot.
Correct.
You basically cannot accept that, a people that you give them political asylum, a people that you are feeding them economically, coming from your own territory, and their lead protagonist in that occupation is somebody like a Tanganji. Is somebody like a Tanganji. The fundamental error of the Cameroon state is its arrogance and the belief that continuous perpetuation of a manipulative historical creation is somehow going to be accepted by any Ambazonian. Secondly, Cameroon is a weak state as far as military is concerned. We are still around here because, we are in a unique liberation struggle. If we were in the times of the 60s where liberation struggles across different countries collaborated against existing colonial entities, we would have reached the border of Equatorial of Gabon. We would have overrun Cameroon long ago.
That's right.
So, we would have overrun Cameroon long ago. They are weak. They are stupid. They are arrogant. They have nothing to offer. They are no model that Ambazonians should ever submit themselves. And I think this conversation, as you have said, is relevant so that our people know the mechanism through which Cameroon has instituted dates that it has continuously celebrated and denied itself to even celebrate dates of relevance to its own history. This is how stupid a country is. That, from what you said, how would you deny yourself full sovereignty, control of territory, to mortgage that into a federal system where you had less control? And why will you deny yourself the right to celebrate a day of nationalism, a day of pride like the 1st of January 1960, that you gain independence? For a conception like 11 February and a conception like the 20th of May. This is no country that we should have as a neighbor. let alone a country that should be able to determine the kinds of institutions that exist in our own country. It's a country to be pushed as far as possible off our own neighborhood. And I think that I'm very grateful that we are around, you know, to see this evolution take place.
Yeah, these are some of the puzzles, and I've had occasion to ask people, some French Cameroon colleagues, I said, why do you guys subscribe to this fraud of 20th May? You said you achieved independence from France, although the French themselves are on record as saying what they did was to give French Cameroon l'indépendance fictive. And the French still maintain it because French Cameroon is virtually a French vassal state, you know, controlled by France in every respect. Because if it was independent, and if it has sovereignty as it keeps on proclaiming every day, why would you give away that very critical date where you become master of your own destiny for some fraud concocted by some individual acting at the behest of the French? It's something which is these are some of the many things which puzzle anybody about French Cameroon, and that we ask the same question, and French Cameroon always says it has intellectuals. But how would they have accepted this? Like some collective brainwashing that took place, and even up to now, as we talk now, they have the parrot, the propaganda machine, which they call TV, is still churning out that deception. And people are buying that deception and claiming that 20th May is a national day. When you ask them, why is it a national day? They cannot explain. They will tell you it's reunification. And you ask them, what reunification are you talking about? Oh, on 11th of February, people of the Southern Cameroons voted for reunification with French Cameroon. And I said, could you reproduce for me that UN question they asked? Where did you find reunification there? I've not found it. I've searched and said there's no such thing. There was no such option as reunification. So, they said that was reunification, and so the 20th May was unification. Oh, I mean, you see, they keep on turning things around, and they call it national unity. Then I asked them, let us take, I know you don't believe in that, but let us say, tomorrow, and I know it's going to happen, Ambazonia is no longer part of you. You don't have any connection at all. Since you say it's your national day, will you continue to celebrate it? Then it gets stuck. Because you cannot say yes, or continue to celebrate it, because it will be meaningless at that particular point, you see. And this will show these people how they can collectively get into, even those of them who are educated, you know, they buy this story. And I'm aware that a number of them have come out in the open and said this whole thing was a whole fraud. But that outing has just been episodic. It has not been a continuing thing. So French Cameroon, Cameroon has been like that. And it has been a very, very curious entity to speak. And for many people who don't know, Cameroon is an amalgam. Even during the time of French colonial rule, there were two, the northern part was completely different from the southern part. The Muslim, what is called Muslim North and the Christian South. And our people who don't know, the French, even before, just before independence for French Cameroon, contemplated cutting off the North and incorporating it with Chad. Interesting. That was on the cards. They discussed it seriously. Discussed it. And at some point, they gave it up. Then somebody said, why don't you give it to Nigeria? Because these were the same people. Interesting as it was, you know. And then somebody said, one Frenchman said, we cannot do that. You know what the British did to us at Fashoda? If anybody who read history know how the British beat the French at Fashoda. Fashoda is in Sudan there, and so on. And they said, no, we can't do the British this favor. No. We better take this thing and give it to Chad. Then the argument went on and on and on. And they said, well, let's just leave it as it is. But we don't trust the southern people. They're the ones who started the Maquis and so on. So let's get Ahijo. He's a good boy. We can control him and make him in charge of Cameroon. And that's how Andre Marimbida was kicked out. And Ahijo took over as premier of French Cameroon, and the rest is history. The one thing which Ahijo did, I keep on saying this, when a country lives in deception and in fraud, it eventually catches up with them. When Ahijo, in the end, had this fight with his self-appointed successor, Biya was never elected by anybody. Biya had never won even a Cartier election anywhere. Never. And that's the first time in history where you find a successor head of state appointed by decree. No, it was not even by decree, by radio announcement. He just simply made a radio announcement. I'm leaving. And your next president is XYZ. And he became president, just like that. And when they started fighting, and this fellow got Ahijo sentenced to, in absentia, to death and all this. In faraway France and subsequently Senegal, Ahijo described Biya as a fraud. He said, this man is a fraud, he's a dishonest. I knew very well that this man has no original ideas. I knew very well that this man cannot work independently. He has to be guided, to be told to do this, and so on. But one thing which I didn't know, and which I didn't have any security report about, is that this man was a fraud and a person who pretended a lot. And he confessed, and it was his last thing. He said, because they generally asked, what would you consider one of your big decisions? He said, one of his greatest mistakes which he made was never to have trusted what he called Anglophones. But he was saying that, selling after the market. Well, you never trust Anglophones, you are out to destroy them, and so on and so forth. And as I say, we are having this conversation and saying these things just for the historical record. Because we're no longer there anyway. We've left. We're already on our journey. And all we need to do is, in the nearest future, is to come back onto our own after we've expelled the colonial oppressor. So, this Cameroon we're talking about, if you read their history, I want to read their history, quite interesting, very convoluted. But it shows how deceptive, how deceitful they are, all of the political leadership and the things they do, and lack of principles and honesty. This is the whole thing. How can you run a country when there is no principle at all? For them, everything has to be by manipulation and the use of force. That's how it has been in their life and so on. And no country can ever thrive in that way. And that is why French Cameroon, or Cameroon as it is, the future is very bleak for that country. If it survives as an entity, it will be very, very lucky. Because the internal divisions are very, very deep and historical. And right now, you have a tribal oligarchy which is in power and sustained by a tribal military that passes for a national military. This is not good for the country at all. It isn't. It's no good. It's no good. And the sooner the rest of that country stand up and assert themselves, because they do have a right of internal self-determination, and ensure that they have a proper system in place and a proper elected government. I don't see them going any far, frankly. France will not continue to foot the bill for them. France will not continue to do it, because right now France itself is in big shit, as I can say it. When the military of a developed country, like the one in France, stands up and tell the president, we'll make a coup d'etat if you don't change your ways. They didn't say it once, they didn't say it twice. Then it has become very, very serious. And the people of France, their eyes are now open. Thanks again to the internet. They now know what their government are doing. They now know that they're living on borrowed time, borrowed money, stolen from Africa, and things are beginning to change. So if French Cameroon doesn't change, I'm not too sure what the future holds for them. It may well go into pieces. You know, the Betty agenda, which we knew that they and anybody can see what they've been planning, that they will not give power to the North, this want the power back. And because they say if they give power back, then they were going to oppress them. And as a contingency plan, they developed that area and assert their own independence. At first, they thought they could do that in connection with Equatorial Guinea. But Equatorial Guinea has since signified to them they were not interested at all, and has even built a wall. Many people don't know it, between itself and French Cameroon. So we don't want you guys here. So it's as bad as that.
Yeah, I think it's too late. It's too late for Cameroon to make any change. And I think it's our strategic military objective to make sure that Cameroon is disintegrated. Because one of the biggest problems that independent countries face is the country that they have moved out from, using its superior economic and political stability during the period of transition to make new leaders within the independent state. There is a great danger, secondly, that the survival of Cameroon could create within Ambazonia leadership with the same Cameroon mentality and perpetuate the Cameroon system within our country. Apart from putting in place institutions and rules that should clearly depart from what we have experienced in the past 60 years. So, systems that reflect our own realities. We must make sure that Cameroon is in turmoil for a long time and should be looking up to Ambazonia for stability and to recreate the new Cameroon in the image of the new Ambazonia. Because one thing is certain, and you have spoken about it. France cannot survive as a colonial patron. It can no longer survive as a colonial patron because the social media has exposed France a lot. As I have said repeatedly, France is not a country that believes in the existence of minorities. And so it has not created systems within its own constitutional order to protect the growing minorities that exist within France. And that has been a great source of tension in France as a whole. That internal tension with a corrupt political leadership that has survived in corruption, the perpetuation of violence within the continent of Africa is going out of business. And it's to our advantage to make sure we begin to articulate strongly publicly a system that we are, and that such a system must be a great departure from what we are fighting against. Now, one of the the greatest problem Cameroon is going to face is these axes that exist within its own country, that has been ruled by both the tribal army and the tribal political system, are also warming up for their day. They believe, rightly or wrongly, that some of them think like the northern axis still believe in entitlement, that they were entitled to power by what I usually describe as a fraud and a pretentious southerner, and that in the situation that there is instability, it will give them the opportunity to rewrite the wrongs that the southern provinces have done onto them. And it is to the best interest of Ambazonian to promote that division within Cameroon, to create a kind of instability that will probably give the opportunity for the creation of a new Cameroon state. But Prof, I would like you to address something which I think you have more depth of knowledge in. You started talking about it, the notion of unification, reunification is born out of a perception of the existence of a legal state called Cameroon, dismembered by war or any kind of schism. And as far as I know, you've written about this both in your academic work, in your submission to Banjul. The fact that there has been no entity called Cameroon as a state recognized under international law that involves Ambazonia or any other historical component of what the Germans call Cameroon. Secondly, you've also written and submitted about the fact that I think the conception of the German Cameroon as far as 1884, and Ambazonia only became part of that German Cameroon in 1887. Am I right?
Mm-hmm. Very correct. Yeah, you see, this is again another distortion which some of the famous historians in Cameroon they decided to keep silent about and to hide it. The fact is that way back as 1843, Ambazonia was connected to the British, because that's when the British started these anti-slavery campaigns along the Bimbia coast, Victoria around there, and so on. And so you had those connections. And from that anti-slavery activity, they started concluding a lot of treaties. And I counted them amazingly, over 20 of those treaties, which were concluded with the coastal chiefs, the British. And of course, then Victoria was taken over and became a British colony by Basel Mission, and was named Victoria, Queen Victoria. And so the whole area was British. And according to the colonial theory in those days, once a colonial power lands at the coast of a country, all the hinterland, because it was known as the hinterland theory, became part of the territory of that colonial power. And so the coast of Ambazonia and the hinterland of Ambazonia became the British territory. And it was like that. It stayed on that way until 1887, mid-1887. Again, because these things, what the colonial power used to do is they transfer territories in exchange for something and so on. So the British now said, well, okay, we are prepared to leave this area for you because we already have a big colony of Nigeria there, protectorate of Nigeria, and negotiated with the Germans. So the Germans took over. But it was not like an easy takeover. Although it was 1887, the Germans were only able, we all know, that it was about 1889 that the Germans were able to fight the wars with the Bakuris in Boya, And slowly, through a real gradual process, we're pushing in the hinterland. Because at the Berlin conference, the new rule was no longer the hinterland theory. The new rule now was effective occupation. No colonial power could claim a territory until it has shown that it had effectively occupied it. So the Germans had to fight every inch of their way. From Victoria, Boya, going up to Kumba, all those places, Manfe, going through to Bali, Mangkong, and so on. And sometimes they will use some of the explorers who go to reconnoiter the place before the Schuss troop came along and so on. So, although we became, they were handed over in 1887, the effective German peaceful occupation of what we call Ambazonia today did not last for more than a few years. And by 1914, early 1914, the very first month of the World War, the Germans were kicked out. And the German colony of Cameroon and Cameroon were liquidated at the treaties of Versailles. It ceased to exist. There was no such thing anymore as a German territory. Of course, the physical territory was there, but that physical territory now was made available to different powers, you know. And that's why legally the British took one side and the French took one side. And for the history, the British were very generous with the French. Much of the German Cameroon was militarily conquered by the British. So from Mora coming down, right up to Garua, even the Yaoundé itself. Before the French and the Belgians could get there, the British were there, and of course Douala was taken by the British. So if the British wanted, they could still have taken the whole territory they wanted, or at least half of it, or 3/4 of it. But the British view was that, well, we already have Nigeria. Again, Nigeria has been plaguing us a lot. Nigeria already is too big for us and so on. So all we needed was a small strip of territory to have a fine border there of Nigeria. So we're not interested in having a big territory. And that's why the British gave up. In Douala itself, which the British it was the British that bombarded Douala and took it over. They could well have kept it if they wanted. Especially as in colonial times, the Douala chiefs had petitioned the British Queen several times to take over their territory. And the British had declined. But the British could have this opportunity, they could have taken it. But again, they declined, they said they're not going to take it. So our period of being part of German Cameroon, less than 30 years, in fact, just about 25 years. Just enough time for them to build the slush in Boyade. But there was no effective administration in the hinterland of Ambazonia. Most of those places. So when you hear anybody tells you that this Cameroon is built on the foundation of that German Cameroon, it's false because it's not true. German Cameroon ceased to exist and was never resuscitated. The French Cameroon, or what they call Cameroon today, takes its own life from the mandate system, which granted France a mandate to run, to take the Maïda territory. In other words, they are talking from 1922, the political force that was set in motion at that time. So that's where it derives its position as a political entity. But of course, like every historical thing, you can go back to past history and go back to see. Like I was just listening yesterday to somebody who was saying that the Douala people came from the Congo. We are Congolese. The man even said, these people are Congolese. They came from the Congo. So if you want to extend that kind of a theory, you might say, okay, we'll go and grab the Congo. But no, the theory that French Cameroon or Cameroon is successor to German Cameroon is laughable and doesn't make any legal sense. It's like Italy now saying they are the successor to Roman Empire. That Roman Empire, which traced right up to the whole of Europe and Britain. So they are the successor now, and all of that will be part of Italy. It's as stupid as that. But they say these things, and I'm surprised that nobody even ever challenges them to say those things. And the ordinary people just swallow it, put beg and sinker. No. French Cameroon derived is as a territory and a political entity from 1922 under French regime. And the French ruled them until the French gave them independence. And it became a successor, not to German Cameroon, but to French Cameroon. In the law of state succession, a new state succeeds to the immediate predecessing state, not some remote state. Because if you were to do that, we'll go back to right from ancient times and start saying, okay, in that case, Nigeria will claim the whole of northern Cameroon because the Nigerians, Osman Danfodio's son, Adama, had conquered, come right down to what we call to Adamawa. So Nigeria could claim all of that as part of Nigeria, if you have to take it that way. But no, it's really silly. And I don't understand how people don't see it this way. So that is how French Cameroon is. We are not part of that. We've never had any connection with France. Even today, we've never had. French Cameroon, we never had any ties with French Cameroon until this thing about after the plebiscite in October 61. You didn't mention a point. Of course, because of our generosity, we gave these people asylum. They escaped and came there. And we didn't just give them asylum. We gave them jobs. We educated them. And they grew up there. And some of them married there. That's how generous we are. So, anybody who is now trying to say that using the concept of reunification, that's why the whole concept of reunification doesn't make any sense at all. It makes more sense to talk of unification or unity because A and D can unite even if they had no connection before. The Chinese can decide to unite with Americans. That doesn't mean that they have had any common destiny anywhere at any time. So that is what it is. Unification or unity, but not reunification, because reunification, and that's the thing they're roping us in. When they say reunification, they're trying to inculcate in people's mind that we were one before. Yes. And like they say, oh, it's a colonial master that came and separated us, so all our civil unions coming back together. How stupid, how silly it is. You know, people we never even knew, had no connection with at all. Even during the German times. Let them tell us the this common assembly we're all sitting in during the German times. Or there's one government, who were all parties in our government. They can tell us. There was none. It did not exist. So they can't talk of oneness even. So I've always challenged the concept of reunification, but which we know and I know they are simply instrumentalizing it and using it for the purpose which that's part of their own strategy to make sure they get those of us who are foolish enough to believe that that's what it is. And I hear it, some of our people keep on parroting it. As I like you rather remarked, a lot of our people, I've never seen a people who are so whimsical. They can't assert their own identity. Yeah. The colonial authority come and tells you, oh, you're Southern Cameroon, say yes, sir. Some other one come and say, you are West Cameroon. You say yes, sir. Next day you say, no, you are Northwest South. Oh, yes, sir. The next Northwest South region, yes, sir. Now they're saying you are Noso, you say, oh, yes, sir. And here people that call themselves, I'm a Northwesterner, I'm a Southwesterner. I even saying I'm a Noso. I mean, sometimes these things I laugh and I just cannot understand where these people are coming from. You know? Yeah. Especially in a world where people are talking about identity issues which are so important, try to assert themselves. No, some people don't, you know, which is such a shame. But of course, as we said, the youth now have come along and turned the tables around. Things are changing. And even things like the name structure. People became no longer Solomon Tandem Mona, which we know, became Mona Solomon Tandem. So even our order of them were changed. You know, and so our people, no longer Peter, became Pierre. Our Mary is no longer Mary, is Marie.
Marie.
Oh my goodness.
You have a Mankom girl, you call her Ngum, and she is very unhappy. Yes,
happy.
Yes, that you're trying to call her Marie.
Yeah. You see, yes. Yes. I don't know. In some instances, maybe in some instances, there are survival techniques, You know that if you come out with true names and so on, you'll be shunted.
No. It's not survival technique. It's an acceptability technique.
I tell you. Oh yes, of course, yes, to be accepted, yes.
Yes, it's simply it holds true to some of us who are out here, and sometimes we listen to Biafrans who are out here, and we are. You find a Biafran who has a child with a Norwegian or with a German, and you get the name is Ijoma, and you find a black child born with a German called Klaus. You are wondering what the hell is it possible that a child is called Klaus?
No, oh my goodness, identity, yeah.
So, La République, within the age of C, I try to address everyone by their surname.
Yes.
So you call by their surname because it tells you where they come from. It's an intrinsic part of their identity, and it holds true with music, Prof. Imagine that somebody sang a music in Mancon, in Bakwarian, in Meta 20 years ago. It sounded funny. It sounded funny, honestly.
Indeed. And nobody wants to listen to it. They want Makosa.
Listen to it. Call it country music.
Exactly.
Because the perception of Makosa, even if it is sung in Douala that we do not understand, it's so
understand. Yes.
And I am so happy that places like Kwakwa, places like Kugwe, places like Alabukam, that made no sense. Oh God, freedom is good. Freedom is good.
It's good. And our music is now coming out. Our musicians are now singing and churning out our music. It makes a whole difference.
Yes. I am so happy because one of the greatest things about colonialism is about mental colonialism. The moment the colonial power decides that the amount of information you have, your identity is going to be seen through their own image, or is going to be constructed by them. Even if you free the land, you still remain a tool of their instrumentalization. And I am glad that Ambazonians are accepting their Ambazonianness. Ambazonians are able to call, you hear names of our generals. General No. You hear names, yes, big number. You hear all those names. They are becoming trendy. We are creating a new vocabulary, And if you read, I will forward you the Norwegian report. I will forward you the Norwegian report on the Ambazonian struggle. You'll be shocked. They have names inside like black. They name last. They have all of the things that we have created. Amba is not a joke, Prof.
Oh my goodness.
So we have laid the foundation. I think you and those before us, and we are very grateful. And that's why I always tell those who are coming in today that they should not forget. And this is the big mistake. Today I was reading the letter we sent to Kaktu. It was sent by the then deputy leader of the AGOC, who is now in jail. I found the letter when I was trying to look at the minutes of the foundation of the AGOC. I found the letter he sent to these to teachers and to lawyers, and appealing to them that even though we are grateful that you are struggling to protect our system of education, our common law tradition, protecting these things within the context of a free Ambazonia is the insurance policy you can give the next generation. And you remember, I think you and myself, we worked hard to get the meeting in Boya, I think it's 2016, to bring all of these people together so that we depart from the notion of trying to reform the colonial state to that of really asserting our independence. Why I'm saying this is because before I became a member of what you created in 1990, the SDF, before we ever came up, you know, the Abemukongs and the others had laid the foundation. The biggest mistake we did, when we came in, we thought, instead of building on what others had created, we simply, you know, erased that history and started all over again. And it has been a big problem within the Ambazonian struggle. And why I'm saying this is because what exists today should and can never be undone. The foundation of our current consciousness, which you people laid, which we have projected, should never again be shelved aside for any expedient processes, you know, to stabilize without. And this should be a lesson for us. And I think one of the biggest things that has bedeviled our generation, which social media has helped to solve a bit, is the basket of knowledge. Yeah, Cameroon has wallowed in deception, revisionism, and it has used familiar faces amongst us, you know, to perpetrate and propagate the deception. The amount of input in terms of knowledge that you have will determine how resilient you can be in the struggle for liberation. Because a struggle for liberation is very enduring. It's very difficult. It is. Yes, and endurance is only based on a foundation of knowledge that what you are fighting, shedding your blood for and dying for is not some contraption based in deception. And I think the social media has given us an opportunity to continuously have this discussion that we are having today, so that Amazonians should know, number one, there has never been any historical entity called Cameroon as a legal state accepted under international law as such, with borders fixed, including Ambazonia. It has never existed. And as you talked about the laws of the creation of states, it's dissolution. The concept of nation state is a young one from the Westphalian notion of concept of nation states. The only time Cameroon has existed as a state was from 1st January 1960. And it didn't still include Ambazonia. And the notion of reunification, based on the assumption that we were first together, is also what you describe as a fraud that Ambazonians should never buy. And even that of unification as born out of the 1972 maneuver is also a fraud. You cannot build a nation on a foundation of fraud and deception. It will crumble like, you know, anything that has existed before us, more powerful than Cameroon has been. And I'm glad that we are having this conversation to let our people really have a stronger foundation upon which, you know, they continue to resist and die.
Yeah, our people should know we have our country well secured, international boundary treaties, unmovable, very, very clear, you know, and during the Bakassi case, what has simply just happened is we will not need to litigate that Nigerian boundary anymore because now the pillars have planted everything.
Exactly.
On the other side of French Cameroon, the pillars are there already. So we are on firm grounds. The only little things which I see we will need to tidy up there is a maritime boundary, one with French Cameroon and two with Equatorial Guinea. And then we'll be in good shape. So we are on firm grounds. We are on firm grounds. We are well poised to become one of the leading countries on the African continent. And I've told our people, and I keep on saying, this is time for our engineers to shine, for our geographers to shine. And somehow I have a feeling that the day after independence, our people are not likely to give us more than 5 years to show that all this suffering has been worthwhile. In other words, they would like to see the network of roads like the countries that have been there in Europe and America and so on, from Victoria to Nkambe, and railway connectivity from Victoria to Nkambe, and the development of the ports. This is going to happen. And this is why right now we should start making those plans and laying everything on the ground. So when we get to Boya, we don't start scratching our head and say, okay, fine, let's figure out what this thing would already have been figured out while we're out here in exile. So go down there, it's just a question of implementing and seeing how we get on. People have raised issues of money. Well, when we get to our bridge, we cross it. And I don't think accessing money to build infrastructure, road, railway, ports, and so on will be going to be a problem. Not going to be a problem. That's going to be access. So these are the challenges that we have. We should probably look forward to the future and with confidence and the things we need to do. Our people want to see a difference from French Cameroon. God forbid that after independence, we still inflict the agony the people have suffering now on our people. So it must be a free people in every respect, freedom of movement. They have a choice, ride in their cars on very good road, take the train if they want to take the train, go in any part of the country they want at their own convenience. You can be in Bamenda, you hop down to Victoria, it's just a question of a few hours, and hop back to Bamenda if you want to, and vice versa. It should be like that. And that's what independence is. And you choose where you want to live, in a comfortable home. If we have good road connectivity, anybody will stay in that village if they want to. I can stay in Osha and come on and walk in Bamenda if I want to. It's just a matter of just less than an hour, few minutes. So this is the ambition, the kind of thing we want for our future nation. That different possibilities. Fly in, fly out. Come by sea if they want to. Have boat rides leisurely from one end of the country to another. So I hope and I pray that our people are listening, and our scientists are listening, and our engineers are listening, our doctors and all our professionals, pharmacists, nurses, and so on. This is the challenge.
Thanks a lot, Prof. I'm going to allow you, as a big brother, biggest brother in the house, you will give the concluding statement. I will just I'll give my own statement, and you will as I said to you, you must make sure that we work extremely very hard to get this thing, so that you and the phone is still around. The Ongoji Dinka, he's there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
must arrange, I don't know, to go to Britain sometimes, I don't know when, with all the lockdown, I don't know.
Yeah, when we meet again there, we should be able to pay him a visit, and yes, listen to him, get his blessing somehow. But this is what is important for the reason why Ambazonia has failed itself has been the absence of an army to defend what belongs to it. We should make no mistake. All of our intellectual argument, all of the treaties that give us the notion of statehood, all of the laws, natural and treaty that makes us a state will be totally irrelevant in the absence of the instruments of defense. And sometimes when I talk about defense, people feel like, it's just thinking about war. When you live in a neighborhood where you to build a kind of military that not only protect you against those hostiles, but to ensure that you can have the peaceful environment to develop your own potentials. And that's why, see, in the past 20 something years, we have argued strongly, and you are aware of this from the time we left the University of Boya, that Cameroon is a rapacious state that believes in arrogance, in war weapons. And the only time it's going to respect Ambazonia is when Ambazonia flexes its muscles and show Cameroon that we can match them based on arguments and ideas, but it can also match them based on firepower. And I am grateful that so far this idea has become a universal currency that every village, every block has bought into, and people are rising up within different places to defend their neighborhood against, you know, the penchant of the colonial state. On the 29th, we are launching a major fundraiser to continuously provide for our people the instruments with which they can defend themselves. We have recognized in the past few months the fact that once our forces became lethal against Cameroon moving targets, they decided to entrench themselves in armor. And I argued a few months ago that these armor cars have given Cameroon the opportunity to penetrate into our hinterlands, burn down villages, commit atrocities, and walk back. And you have asked me several times, what the hell is happening with you? You said, Joe, what the hell is happening? That these guys could simply just drive a column of armor cars uninterrupted. You know, it's because our AK-47s could no longer stop them. And that's why we have developed the technology, you know, to be able to beat them within those armor cars. And our fundraiser on the 29th is to make sure that we are able to protect about 5 states with this new technology, and to provide our forces with heavy artillery like machine guns to enable them to defend territories that we presently control in a dynamic fashion. And I hope, Prof, that you will add your voice to all Ambazonians to continuously entrust in us the opportunities to provide to the men and women who have sacrificed for the past, have the opportunity to defend themselves and our villages. And thank you very much for having been here with me. I think I've learned a lot, and I'll still be doing a lot of reading of your historical material. And I am also grateful to the fact that you talked about setting maritime borders, fixed borders, and those things. Those things are relevant at the time when Cameroon surrenders and negotiate itself out, or decides at any time to come forward to negotiate itself out. And people like you will be instrumental in being able to hold them accountable for relevant if necessary for them to leave our country. I want to thank our people who have been following us. We will be doing this kind of outing regularly, and so that we learn from history, so we never make the mistakes our forebears did, and that we can shape the future in the way that Prof has rightly elucidated here, in terms of our engineers, in terms of our professionals, but also in terms of the true drivers of our economy, the farmers, the little traders, the buy-and-sellers, the taxi drivers, the motorbike riders, the majority of the people whose daily effort is responsible for the households that are in our country. And also to our great diaspora that without whom, you know, Cameroon would have simply manipulated our people on the ground, chosen those he could negotiate with, stop information from going out. They have mobilized the international community. They've been able to pin on the desk of every parliament and every state a narrative that conforms with our reality. And so together as a people, I think we've done so far well. We simply need now to bring together our energy, as journey which I think we can bring it to an end in a speedy fashion. Thanks a lot, Prof, and over to you for the last word.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I just want to say that our people should have confidence in themselves and that they should be preparing now as the ultimate sacrifice is being made by our fighters on the ground, whom we must support in every possible way we can, either with funding or with our knowledge, with our creativity, with our inventiveness, and with our ingenuity. And that as we are out for those of us in the diaspora, we must also be thinking of the day after we get back home, the things we need to do to change things around. And I think, like you said, our compatriots at home must start looking forward what they are going to start doing the day after independence. There are a lot of opportunities. I've always said, after we get back home, Ambazonia will be open for business. And we'll be starting everything from scratch, which is a good opportunity for us to get everything right, to get all the things we want to do right. We must leave behind for our children a country that is better, a country that is a happy place to live in, a country where everybody, every single Ambazonian will live out their dream. And I want to encourage all of us in this endeavor, have confidence in ourselves. Never one moment doubt that we are going to be independent and be masters of our own destiny. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Prof. Good night.
Stay tuned on ACN TV. We will be right back.
So Cameroon, southern Cameroon was tinning coffee, and this coffee was of standard to marry exportation. And as a matter of fact, a good part of it was being exported. In the name of label, in the name of Southern Cameroon, CDC. Tea was the same. Ayaba saw to it that the Santa Coffee Estate was abolished. And so there was no other means of the Southern Cameroon, you see, running, getting its own independent income. So all the income, we must look to Yaoundé as the only father of the federation to do everything. And now, the Prime Minister of the Southern Cameroon was going to be left with no duty. So he has to abolish it. First, the Cameroon Bank, which had outgrown other banks in La Republic, was the source of income by people from Douala, Kongsamba, and all these other places who want money for trading. Before that time, before 1970 something, before 1970 something, no bank in La Republic could borrow money, give a loan up to 1 million. If you want a loan up to beyond the 500,000, you have to fly to France. Only France will approve it. But the Cameroon Bank had risen to loan money to 5 million. So traders in Douala and along the Mango and furthermore were able to get enough loan. That was not so good for Ayaba. That was why then everything, Southern Cameroon must fall. We organized the development agency to give loans to farmers and so on, to businessmen. And more so, Nanga company was rising up to compete to other companies, the French company. And had, in fact, built the Prime Minister's office in the Southern Cameroon out of a mere 45 million francs at that time. But a building like that could have cost no less than 150 million. But using the English way of economy and way of organizing labor, Nanga company was able to do it for 45 million. That was a slap on the face of the Republic of Cameroon. It was an indication that the British were going to abolish or more or less lessen the amount of bribes and the money they get from the contracts. And so everything was, by not signing the draft constitution, everything fell in the hands of Ayaba. I was charged with the president or national president or chairman of the Higher National Council for Education. And I held that post up till the time I left, or before the time I left. I had talked so much about technical education that in the end a good subsidy from the United States President, I think President Agnew, gave $10 million That was a big sum of money at that time for technical education. And I told Ayejo that I would like the Southern Cameroon to benefit from that 10 million by raising the technical college of Ombe to a higher technical college and institute as at the beginning one in Bamenda. But Ayejo spent all that money on his own side. Instead, I never knew that that was his ways of doing things. Instead, it decentralized, about it downgraded the Ombe Trade Center Technical College to the grade of his own cap. All the heavy equipment left by the British were looted. Everything was run, and then he transferred all the British trained teachers there. He transferred them to teach secondary school. Then I had sent to the state of Wisconsin 12 teachers to study a few years for the industrial subjects in both primary school and the new colleges which might be built. Then these finished their qualification and came back about 1966. Not one of them was posted in Limbe, so they were made to teach English in other schools. And nothing was mentioned about technical education, and so on. So the University of Caste, Technical University of Caste, which was to be built, which was one of those which was to be built alongside with the University of Yaoundé. We couldn't get teachers in those days, we couldn't get funds in those days. And the United States sponsored the Peace Corps and the principal who opened the pre-university of caste in the form of higher secondary school. It grew so rapidly and got the CDC at very good rate. Their successes in the GCE advanced, especially their scientific knowledge, was high. Ayejo and the rest, detected that and started dwarfing them in the Polytechnic of Yaoundé. So much that by 1985, the number of English students who left caste and entered very great difficulty were under 10. All those who were entered there found the condition either so bad that they managed to leave, or those which remained, out of the whole time since 85, under 10 out of 400 who have graduated in the Polytechnic School of Yaoundé. So I noted that Ayejo wanted to dwarf Southern Cameroon as far as School of Technology was concerned. And later on, when he decided to decentralize the University of Yaoundé, he left the University of Caste not mentioned. He later on proposed a university for Buya. And you know how long that took. He put the name after he had been approached. I've asked him, he proposed that one, Now he didn't want to do anything with caste in order to keep the northwest and southwest, you see, divided. So he proposed a university a university with no anything. Probably it was going to be a university of culture. He later on made it a translation bureau, as we call it. How could a whole university be for translation? And so it was built. Those buildings were with equipment, with no equipment, and with a number of teachers. What were they teaching? About less than 100 students were there for a whole university. It was recently when Paul Biya found me trying to raise so much objection for rejecting the southern Cameroonian in the technical education, technical university of Douala. When he started trying to allow very few to enter, very few English-speaking Cameroonians to enter. Otherwise, they wanted to dwarf southern Cameroon from any technical rising. They had found our scientific knowledge high, our secondary school organization high. They want to abolish the GCE in 85. When I stepped in, and they brutalized our students. When I stepped in to quarrel with Paul Biya, they brutalized the students. I took them to task in the Central Committee meeting, and then the only persons who could support me was the late Dr. Fanlong and Professor Ngu. And they made it clear. And during that time too, after our students were brutalized, I summoned a meeting of Ndele, Mona, Egbe and myself to meet in Yaoundé and then discuss the matter with the president. The day I arrived, I flew to Yaoundé. None of them appeared. They were still my opponent. Ndele did not come, Mona did not come. And so that failed. And I wrote to I wrote to Paul Biya, asking him that he wants to discipline our sons and daughters out of our own intervention. I asked him whether he would be able to do that. And the security men said at that time that if the students demonstrate, they were going to shoot. I called the deputy minister in charge of Gendarmerie and asked, do they not know that that was annoying? Whether when they shoot any student for demonstration, I will sit with them. Or they simply answered, well, it was a mere try to frighten them. So we don't frighten people by talking about shooting. Told him whether he had known that students in some part of the world burn themselves with petrol for protests, and whether by that frightening the English people will stop bringing their voices to be heard. the southern competence. The southern Cameroon had nothing to administer with the taking over of the, or with the dissolution of the National Assembly and the House of Chiefs and everything. There was no authority in the southern Cameroon. That's what is called annexation. Annexation went much further, that anything that existed in the southern Cameroon was not allowed to remain under that name. Now, this Prime Minister of the Southern Cameroon, using the two alternatives, he had administrative authority, he had the economic development in his own hands, and of course, security in general was going to be a matter for which could be discussed, you see, to make it both for the federal government, or what we call concurrent. That is to say, the Prime Minister of the Southern Cameroon was going to be in charge of the police, and the army could be national, territorial. We didn't think of the gendarme to be extended in the southern Cameroon for any reason. It was because when there was no constitution, that he managed to send the gendarme in the southern Cameroon, and gradually now posting all this there, his obedient troops, that is obedient civil servants, and they can do anything there. They are protected by him, so anything could happen.
When did the gendarmes come into West Cameroon? To Southern Cameroon?
Let's say as soon as the British troops left. You know, the British trained a mobile wing, which not many at all. So the gendarme came to help the mobile wing and to man some of the places. And when they came, the mobile wing was holding some part of the stations, and they were holding other parts. But they despised the mobile wing, while the mobile wing also despised them, because they had no form of military maneuver as they. Most of the terrorists were captured by the mobile wing, Southern Cameroon mobile wing. They combed the frontiers of the Mongo, Santa, and brought out some of the terrorists who were happening there. And of course, it was the Nigerian, from Nigeria, I mean the Nigerian forces which left Nigeria. People, general like General Tato and others who really did the combing of the frontier without killing. They didn't kill the terrorists. They rounded them up, used them to find out where the others were, treated them well, and then bring peace. One of the next project which we had was lottery. I sent a team to Israel to train for lottery. They came and established a rapidly growing lottery, and we were getting the money now to build hospitals and clinics. Ahijo didn't want the people of his own section to patronize our lottery. The Prime Minister, Sali was a Prime Minister. I negotiated with him, but Ahijo did not agree. That the people of the same country. Now I said we were going to share the profits. Ahijo did not agree. Then after 1970, then he transferred it. It became central. Now the Youth Day was formed in the southern Cameroon to commemorate independence for the southern Cameroon, Independence Day, which was the plebiscite day, because there was no other greater thing achieved in the southern Cameroon than by voting so massively for independence and unification. The 11th February is a historic day for the southern Cameroon, which should be commemorated. That was formed by me and my government of the southern Cameroon in 1964. Then 1968, well, the East Cameroon were imitating, want to imitate it. So Ahijo thought it should be centralized, it should be made central. So he centralized it to be also practiced in all parts of the Federation. That was 1960, about 1968, 4 years after. But he did not say that it was there. It was it was started in 1968, he said. Imagine, I think, which was being run in the southern Cameroon since 1954. When he transferred it, he didn't mention the southern Cameroon. It was originated in 1968 or 1966. It might have been 1966 when he transferred it, between these two dates. And in the practice of Francophone, and then not French, as we may say, if you are assistant to any post in Yaoundé, you are just there either to get your money and do what the president say, or you might as well resign. Money to keep people in a post was not their difficult. It was obedient to their party and keep as a subordinate. And with us, that was not possible. We were not running that much. So he had to get a new set of people, you see, who had to toe his line of action. I found myself, you see, incapable of doing things in a very awkward way, in obedience to the head of state. Because I insisted that anything that I do should reflect my own mentality. And everything.
We were advised by colleagues in the United Nations. We have examined the documentation of how you people got together and found that there is nothing at the UN here which legalizes the Republic of Cameroon ruling your country. But your MPs, the people you have elected, are giving legitimacy by the fact that they are participating in the government of the Republic of Cameroon. The God who got us into this servitude is the one bringing us out. I feel confident about it because when our people started having these pro-independence riots, like in Bamenda usually, where they burnt a whole police station and calling for singing home again, trying to get saying this push back out of our country. In response, the Cameroon government enacted a law of the United Republic of Cameroon, law number 84/01. They, in the debates for it, they said the question of calling this thing the United Republic of Cameroon gives the impression that there are two countries that are united. We should therefore make sure this united is out so that there should be no trace that there was another country. Little did they know that the outcome of reinventing the Republic of Cameroon is that legally you have also reinvented the sovereignty of the other country. So the law which they intended to wipe us out is the law that dissolved the illegal union. That is the work of God. There was a proclamation formalizing the sovereignty of our country. We filed that at the United Nations. That was the first time I came here. We filed in the United Nations in 1990. And we were advised by colleagues in the United Nations. We have examined the documentation of how you people got together and found that there is nothing at the UN here which legalizes the Republic of Cameroon ruling your country. But your MPs, the people you have elected, are giving legitimacy by the fact that they are participating in the government of the Republic of Cameroon. If you can get your people to boycott that parliament, we'll give you a seat here, because we applied for a seat to be given to Ambazonia in the United Nations. So I had this discourse with Frundi by phone. Donald Ngundam was here. It was a conference call. I told him what the situation was. And this, it required just blackmail. It's a matter of writing a letter to these MPs that by the 31st of October, you stop going to Yaoundé, because Yaoundé Parliament was to meet about the 4th or 6th of November. If they were absent from that parliament for only 48 hours, we would have been free. In fact, even today, you people who say you have control about these boys back home, if they could get our members of parliament to be absent from Yaoundé Parliament, we will become free. So, Frundi, we airmailed the papers to him. When they arrived, Frundi took them and burnt them. We couldn't understand what happened. However, a separate set was sent to Yongbang in Douala. He took it across to Stephen Tita in Limbe. Stephen Tita summoned the 4 members of parliament from Fako, and it was a unanimous support to boycott. It was 100% support. Those 4 members of parliament said there has to be a boycott. But then, before they realized, they heard that Black people were already in Yaoundé. MPs were there. They had to, because they had not received any papers. We had not seen any. So this is how we lost our first opportunity of becoming free. We would have been free since 1990. But as I say, nothing happens against the will of God. God has a reason why He made Frundi operate that way. International law does not regard you as people of Cameroonian nationality. This must be shocking to you. From where 1st of 1960, international law recognizes the inhabitants of La République du Cameroun as people of Cameroonian nationality. There can be no Cameroonian nationality outside that La République du Cameroun. Please take very great note of this. If you decide to be using Cameroonian nationality as a flag of convenience, it is because you decide to use it as a flag of convenience. But international law does not regard you as Cameroonians. And the Treaty of Funban, Article 1, goes to spell it out. It states, nationals of the federated state shall become Cameroonian citizens and shall possess Cameroonian nationality. This means when your country, which was then called United Nations Trust Territory of Southern Cameroon under United Kingdom administration. Can you listen? That's how to describe a country. Is that the name of a country? Is that the name of a country? United Nations Trust Territory of Southern Cameroon under United Kingdom administration. That is a whole definition of an area. It's not the name of a country. We are coming to why you are not considered as Cameroonians. This identification by description only determines that you are not. It says that when your country accepts to become a federated state in the Federal Republic of Cameroon, then you acquire the right to become Cameroonian citizens and have Cameroonian nationality. But is your country now a federated state in Federal Republic of Cameroon? Is there a Federal Republic of Cameroon? Is there a Federal Republic of Cameroon? So you acquired Cameroonian nationality only by treaty. And once that treaty is abrogated, you are no longer Cameroonians. That's only logical, isn't it? Then what are you? Eventually, the brilliant scholar came and decided to proclaim the secession law 84/001 of the 4th of February 1984, by which he formalized the secession of what was East Cameroon into La République du Cameroun. By that secession, as you must have heard, last speaker, it opened the way. You see, God moves in a very mysterious way. As long as Ambazonia was in this dubious thing of United Republic of Cameroon, there was a fiction of unity existing, even though in international law it had collapsed. There may be some of you who have done political science. This is the principle of extinction and creation of states. Let's start it over. From the moment Southern Cameroon, as it was called, as a state, joined La République du Cameroon in forming the Federal Republic of Cameroon, under international law, the two states are extinct and the new state created is created. That is to say, there is a creation of a new state and an extinction of the two states that are created. Now, when the treaty that has brought this together collapses, as it did, the Federal Republic of Cameroon becomes extinct. That state is extinct. And automatically and simultaneously, with that extinction, the original states are resuscitated. These are the principles of international law concerning creation and extinction of states. Recently, Paul Biya carried a catechism lesson in Boya. He told the people, I am a Cameroonian, and the people shouted after him, I am a Cameroonian. I was born a Cameroonian, the people shouted after him, I was born a Cameroonian. And I will ever remain a Cameroonian. The people shouted, I will ever remain a Cameroonian. Paul Biya did law in Paris. He knows that under international law, you and myself, Ambazonians, are not Cameroonians. And the treaty that gave you Cameroonian nationality has been abrogated. So it was necessary for him to instill into your subconscious the nationality of Cameroonian in order to enable him to rule a country as a colony under the pretext that it is part of Cameroon. Why did he not carry that catechism in the other side? Why didn't he go to Eboluwa and say, I am a Cameroonian, or Je suis Camerounais? Let us hear. Because the people are Cameroonians under international law. But you, who are not Cameroonians, must be made to believe that you are Cameroonians, and you are believing that you are Cameroonians, and as a result, you are even participating in the institutions of the Republic of Cameroon, as if you are like, what you are is that Cameroon Outre-mer, Cameroon overseas. I mean, they themselves call you Cameroon Outre-Mongo. That's what they call you. Why must your own Cameroon be qualified? It is because you are not Cameroonians. And the moment you accept that you are not Cameroonians and decide that you must research your own identity, then we have started a fight. And until then, it's a total waste of time to complain and complain and complain, because nobody outside is going to come and bother about you. If you say you are a minority, there's no country without minority. The United States has several minorities. Nobody can come here and start talking about the United States minority. Quebec is a minority. United Nations can't interfere there. There is no country without minority. But we are not dealing with a minority problem. Article 76 of the UN Charter limits the trusteeship system to only two alternatives for a state. You either develop the state to self-government or to independence. This is our story. The UN is under an obligation, a legal obligation, not a moral one, to implement that. We had a system which was the only system where a government could conduct an election and be defeated by the opposition. Dr. Indele conducted an election that was defeated by Foncha from the opposition. Nowhere has it happened in Africa. Nowhere. To show you that the system was thorough. It was typically British style. Now, they tell us that they voted in a referendum of the 20th May to say that we should be ruled from Yaoundé. And who are you? You go about saying, well, our elders voted in a referendum that we should be ruled as a colony. Where have intelligent human beings, having attained that level of political development, volunteered that a country that was less educated politically, a country of bandits, should come and rule them. Voluntarily, they ask for it to come wipe away their House of Chiefs, House of Parliament, House of Assembly, and crush every other thing there. And you believe that that is what your people did. At the time of that plebiscite vote, or what you call it, referendum vote, it was very interesting to see what happened in the College of Arts in Yaoundé, Bambili, because as always, students are radicals. They made sure there were two papers. One was white, one was black. The black meant no, the white meant yes. And by the time they finished, when they came to pick up the things, the whites were all full on the ground, and inside the box was all black. But what were the results for Bamili? 100% in favor. That is a gigantic fraud which Ahijo used and said the people had accepted that I should run their lives for them. But we are not even interested in that referendum, because the question, as my brother put to you here, is this: was a referendum mentioned in the Treaty of Fumban as a mode of modifying that treaty? If the answer is yes, then we are condemned to be where we are. If the answer is no, then we'll have a right to revolt against an arbitrary government. It is a government that is illegal, and it is illegal to obey an illegal government. That is the course which God has set us forward, and we are not stepping one step back. We have accepted death, and I don't see what else we have before us, because we are tired of being tossed around. The country and the territory from which you come is rich in every aspect, natural and human resources, that if we can be united, if we understand the cause, there is no question of who is boss and who is follower. And we have a people who are willing, as you must have noticed, unarmed. When I was imprisoned and locked up in a VMM, students came out barefisted to face the gendarmes. They burned edifices. In Bangla alone, they razed down the whole gendarme barrack, they razed it with fire. Now, you are young men, and time has come for you people to pick up the gun and pursue this fight to a logical conclusion. Thank you very much.
Stay tuned on ACN TV. We will be right back.
Fellow Ambazonians, fellow children of God, I am Fon Fangum Gojidinka. I had no intention to speak out at this time, but I decided to do so in response to phone and emails calling on me to speak out as the father of Ambazonia. I want to first of all say I am not the father of Ambazonia. The father of Ambazonia is the Lord God, who thousands of years ago created the Ambas Bay. Geography identifies the zone of Ambas Bay as Ambazonia. I am only the little creature which the Lord God used to put the name Ambazonia into writing through the pamphlets I wrote in 1985 on the Ambazonian revolt. It is the Lord God himself who kick-started the Ambazonian revolt by making President Biya enact Restoration Law 84/01 on the 2nd of January 1984, which dissolved the illegal union of our two countries and restored them back as mutually sovereign and independent of each other again, as they were before the illegal union, which was first called Federal Republic
and later called United Republic of Cameroon. President Biya only realized it when I called on him to withdraw from Ambazonia in compliance with his restoration law. This is proof positive that the restoration of Ambazonian independence is the act of God to put an end to Cameroon occupation of Ambazonia. President Biya arrested me, and I was tortured till I suffered a stroke which paralyzed my left side. He then charged me before the Cameroon Military Tribunal with high treason, an offense which is punishable with death by a firing squad. The Lord God made the tribunal dismiss the case, but President Biya rearrested me and put me under indefinite house arrest. From there, I made my escape into exile in 1988. In 1990, I went to the United Nations with our case. And after studying, they advised, 1, that a proclamation be made formalizing the restoration of our country's independence with its geographical identity as Ambazonia. 2, that a formal request be made for a seat at the United Nations, including a request for the UN to put Cameroon out of Ambazonia. This we did. However, the UN said Ambazonia's seat at the UN would be available only